Longevity to me is very simple, Dr. Knight. I would define it as not necessarily adding years to your life, but adding life to those years.
Welcome to Living Real Change, a podcast from Piedmont Healthcare. I'm your host, Dr. Lacey Knight, Chief Health Information Officer here at Piedmont. Join us as we highlight the people, the stories, and ideas that are transforming care and strengthening communities across Georgia. From inspiring patient journeys to expert health advice, each episode offers insight, hope, and a closer look at what real change looks like in healthcare today. Joining us today is Dr. Saju Mathew, a primary care physician at Piedmont Healthcare. In today's episode, we discuss his approach to longevity, the 3 habits he consistently sees in his healthiest, longest living patients: movement, nutrition, and sleep. We also explore practical ways to incorporate these habits into a busy lifestyle, simple and actionable tips for those just beginning their health journey, and the often overlooked role that social connection plays in living a longer, healthier life. Very excited to talk to you today.
Hi, Dr. Knight. Nice to be on the podcast with you.
Thank you. So we're going to talk about longevity today. And so what I wanted to do is really just, from your perspective, maybe you could describe how you think about that term, what that term means to you, and anything else you'd like for our audience to understand.
Yeah, longevity to me is very simple, Dr. Knight. I would define it as not necessarily adding years to your life, but adding life to those years. It's all about a quality of life. I think that if you ask people, do you want to live a long life or do you want to live a life that is productive, a quality of life? I would think that most people would pick the latter. And by seeing the number of patients that I see in primary care, I have taken a very special interest in the last, I would say, 5 to 7 years, especially of what is it that makes an 80-year-old so healthy at that age versus a 40-year-old that can barely climb up a flight of stairs.
Thank you for that. You mentioned different age groups and impact. Obviously, genetics is some component of longevity, but not necessarily the part of it that we can actually act upon. If we were going to start to talk about things based on impact, what do you think would be maybe the best first thing for people to think about when they're thinking about living that kind of full life, having life as they age?
I think about 3 things that come to mind immediately when I think of my patients. I've got a 91-year-old that I've seen for the last 10 years that, believe it or not, still plays tennis, probably sharper than me. And I practice in a neighborhood where patients are very compliant, so I definitely want to let people know that are listening to this podcast that yes, there are different populations. If you live in a population where people show up for the visits and take their medications, then and have access to healthcare, then yes, you are going to see a healthier population. But regardless, it's 3 things that people do consistently that give them that longevity. The first thing would be movement. And when I say movement, it could be walking, climbing up a flight of stairs, some type of muscle strength training, lifting your own body mass. It doesn't have to be where you're going to a gym and physically lifting weights. Second thing would be nutrition. I consistently find that people who are in great shape in their 70s and 80s have consistently eaten a healthy diet most of their lives. They cheat, but they get right back on that bandwagon. And the third thing, believe it or not, is sleep. I don't think we talk enough about the power of sound sleep and how disrupted sleep and years of insomnia increase your risk for so many different conditions, including dementia. So, really, movement, nutrition, and sleep would be the 3 consistent things that people who live long, productive lives do all the time.
Those are good, and I think a lot we can dive into there. So, one of the conversations that family members and I have had about those types of things is that, you know, 50 years ago, our parents, our grandparents, these were not things that they really thought that much about. Life was kind of organized in a way that movement was necessary for transportation. It was necessary for preparing things. It was necessary for keeping things clean and organized. Nutrition was a lot simpler back then. And then sleep was maybe a little bit easier because we had a little bit fewer distractions. And so we fast forward to now. Life is a lot more complex. Most of us depend on public or personal transportation, not so much walking. And so what's emerged are really these industries around helping us get to what we need to do. So I want to talk to you a little bit about if you have any thoughts on really this idea of measuring all of these different components in order to better manage life.
When I think about what you said at the very beginning, I think about how, as a physician today, I need to meet my patients where they are than, say, 15 years ago, with all the gadgets that we have that measures our sleep, our oxygen levels, EKG. Again, I refer to a lot of my geriatric patients. Their gifts over Christmas are all these gadgets. And this one lady has been to the ER 7 times in the last 3 months because her device, the alarm goes off when her blood pressure is at a certain set point, or the EKG might record something abnormal that you and I would consider completely normal. So yes, gadgets are great, but that would be like walking into an expensive high-tech gym where the machines are working you instead of you working the machine. So I think that we have to find that balance. No doubt technology has made things a lot easier for us, like tracking steps, as you mentioned, measuring your sleep at night if you're getting good quality sleep. But I still go back to what I said earlier. Nothing has changed in medicine when it comes to how do you live a productive, healthy life. And it goes back to the basics, the Mediterranean diet. I'm very careful about not using the word diet because I feel like patients who are not in shape think that they have to be on some type of a restriction of their calories and food, when ultimately longevity is all about baby steps. It's not one big decision that you make on a Monday night, it's tiny, tiny steps. And something else that I think about also with longevity along the lines of movement is I would argue that our muscle is the organ of longevity. And it's also why in the last 10 years, I have been the type of doctor that talks to everybody about some type of muscle strength training and not just focusing only on cardio. Cardio by itself will not put you in a space of fitness. It's strengthening your muscles, lifting your own body weight, push ups. I've got quite a few patients who have never been to the gym or can go to the gym because they're married and they're busy. This one guy does 10 push ups between each Zoom call, and he does about 7 Zoom calls. That's 70 push ups in one day. By the time he's done with an 8 hour work period, he's gotten his workout in already and he's ready to have his fish and vegetables for dinner. So I think it's all about a balance, Dr. Knight, and using technology. Yes, genetics plays a role, but I always come back to what I said earlier: movement, nutrition, good sleep.
That's great. How does somebody get started, and how do you know if you're doing enough to make a difference? And let's maybe start with movement. I know you mentioned kind of over time, but for someone who's just hearing about this for the first time and motivated by the conversation and really feels like, you know what, I think I'm going to make some life changes. So how should they think about just getting started with movement and goals and such?
Yeah, it's my favorite sentence in every room: keep things simple. Start off with maybe putting information on a diary. If you're somebody that doesn't walk at all, I would start off with just say 10-15 minute of brisk walking, because walking has shown to not only decrease your blood pressure, improve sleep, it has also shown to decrease dementia by 50%. And walking is free. You don't have to buy expensive clothing. I'm not asking patients to buy equipment or join a gym where most people just pay a membership and not necessarily even show up to the gym. Find a park, find a safe place to walk. Obviously, with the heat in most parts of the US, you want to find the times to go out there. I usually like patients to work out early in the morning or later in the evening. But I would say start off with walking when it comes to movement, and then 2 or 3 days a week, some form of muscle strength training. And again, I keep it basic. It could be um, push ups, it could be climbing up a flight of stairs, it could be just buying 2.5 pound belts. You don't want to buy or invest in anything too heavy. I'm keeping this very general because I every patient has to make sure they check with your doctor before they partake in any of this. But it all starts off with movement, muscle strength training, but most importantly, food. You can never outdo a bad diet by going to the gym. You got to first figure out what's in your pantry. What do you normally have for dinner? Where most of us are creatures of habit. It would be very easy if you keep a diet log for 1 week. Chances are you repeat the same type of foods and buy the same groceries day in and day out. And look at the basic Mediterranean diet, which is try to bake and grill everything, try to cook more at home. If you're eating foods that are high in fat, you can do one thing really quickly and just immediately restrict the number of calories. Eat less of that food, and then over time, try to improve your diet, one step at a time.
So let's talk a little bit more about the Mediterranean diet. Tell me kind of what background you can about how that became popular. And you mentioned a few things around, baking items. Maybe you could give us a little bit more information around what that's like.
Yeah, and if you look at the Mediterranean diet, it's basically what a lot of people in that part of the world have consumed over time: grains, olive oil, baking, grilling items, cutting back on fried foods, not having as much carbs. Everybody has to look at their type of diet. Like, I was born into an Indian culture, and it's so heavily based on fried foods and carbs. And that's also why, if you look at the Asian population, diabetes is a very high risk, and so is heart disease. So ultimately, we are also creatures of the way that we were raised. So if you look at your diet and you're eating a lot of carbohydrates like rice and fried foods, you want to just bring it back down to the essentials. Everything like vegetables should be fresh green leafy vegetables, olive oil, making sure you're not eating a lot of processed foods, foods that come out of a can, or foods that you microwave rapidly. Especially people that are single, we always want to eat food quickly. But ultimately, it's about fish, grilled chicken, vegetables, olive oil, a diet that really makes sense. And a diet, by the way, that you can sustain in any part of the world long term.
Sounds yummy.
Yeah.
At Piedmont, quality care changes lives. Meet Tom, a lifelong medic who suddenly suffered a stroke at home. Tom was diagnosed, treated, and in surgery within minutes, thanks to seamless coordination across the entire care team.
I've seen firsthand how every second counts. When I needed help, Piedmont moved with speed and precision, and that saved my life. A week later, I was back at home with my family, back to work and back to living.
Hear more at piedmont.org/quality care. Piedmont, real change lives here.
Let's talk a little bit about sleep. Maybe you could just describe what good sleep sounds like and what maybe bad sleep sounds like, and what do you mean when you say that people need to focus on getting sleep right?
It's very easy, even without a gadget, to know if you've had a good sleep. You wake up in the morning, how do you feel? Do you feel like you are extremely tired, you have a headache, you're not looking forward to jumping in the shower, making your bed? There's absolutely a lot of truth to people who say, "Oh my God, I'm a morning person. I get out of bed and I feel fresh." Usually, morning people are good sleepers. They go to bed early and they wake up early. People who sleep well typically have good habits, they're very structured. Talking about today's day and age where we have all these gadgets available, and I'm guilty as charged, is no devices in the bedroom. I know when a psychiatrist said that one time, I was like, are you kidding me? You could never say that in 2026 because so many of us go to sleep watching TV on devices or scrolling through TikTok. But the hardest thing is to tell people to change that. So again, I meet them where they are. See if you can do all of that in a room next to your bedroom, maybe in the living room or in the den, and then only go to bed when you feel sleepy. If you wake up in the middle of the night and you're tossing and turning, if it's been more than 30 minutes, you come out of that space, come out of that room and learn. And again, my psychiatrist friends would say, don't turn on Netflix and watch that show that you were watching at 9 o'clock. You want to look at a boring book, maybe even a travel magazine. And then when you're sleepy, you go back to bed. The whole thought process is looking at your bedroom as a place of peace and tranquility, not looking at your room saying, oh my God, here comes another sleepless night.
Okay. Wow. Does it matter if you are consistent about sleep time? Schedules vary every day. Does that seem like that matters?
It's difficult to tell people that are, so busy that you got to sleep at the same time. But again, as I mentioned earlier, I seriously think that the common link in a lot of people who sleep well is that they do have a scheduled hour of sleep. They go to bed at 10, wake up at 5, go to bed at 11, wake up at 6. One small little advice that I would give patients or people that are listening to our podcast on how to sleep better is sometimes if you go to bed too early, then that also can affect your quality of sleep. If you try to get to bed by 9, but you're not really asleep by 11, then go to bed a little bit later, but do all of the rituals that I mentioned outside of the bedroom and then walk into the bedroom when you only feel sleepy. But the whole thing of, hey, it's the weekend, I want to catch up on my sleep. Unfortunately, you don't catch up on hours of sleep that you lost. You just look forward to that next night of doing something different. One last thing I'll mention that I see all the time at work is caffeinated products. So if you're somebody that drinks a lot of coffee, there's some people that are even sensitive to just desserts that have coffee on them. Even those you want to avoid after 12 noon. That way, you're already gearing yourself towards a better sleep that night.
Okay. So also there's groups of people that are looking at, getting blood work on a regular basis that may look for things that are not necessarily completely standardized within the regular practice. So just want to see if you have any thoughts or comments.
I am definitely not the doctor that orders all these what I call sexy labs. If you come in and you're a 40-year-old and I've done all the age appropriate screening, whether it is a colonoscopy at 45, prostate cancer screening for men, either at 45 or 50, depending on your ethnicity and family history. I think that if you order enough labs, you can find plenty of abnormalities. The joke that I tell my patients is give me 2 minutes and I can find a lot of things, quote unquote, wrong with you. But 80 to 90% of those abnormalities, whether on an x ray, a CT scan, or blood work, will not be anything to worry about. So, the biggest advice that I have, number one, is know your family history. Make sure you come in to see your doctor for a physical, knowing about your mom's history, your dad's history, even your uncles, your aunts, your brothers. That will determine the blood work that is ordered that day. But when it comes to extra labs, some of the extra labs that I order would be a vitamin D level. I think that most Americans that I found in my practice are deficient in vitamin D. And there are reasons for that. We apply sunscreen, we block the absorption of vitamin D. Vitamin D is very important for your immune system, recovery. So I definitely believe in that. And then, of course, family history of heart disease. I have started to order, Dr. Knight, the apoprotein little b, lipoprotein A. These are extra cardiac markers that is not just looking at the LDL cholesterol. Most people know about the LDL, which is your bad cholesterol. That doesn't always tell the story. And from a lot of scientific research, these extra cardiac markers can determine if you are going to have a myocardial infarction or a heart attack in the next few years. So ultimately, I am not a believer in just ordering everything under the sun and getting a total body CT, because what you're going to end up finding, like I said, is abnormalities. People will go on Chat GPT, and for the rest of their lives, we're going in a circle. We're getting CTs for that benign mass in their liver or a small, tiny nodule in their lungs. And that can actually affect your quality of life. But know your history. You need to find a doctor that's open minded, and make sure that your concerns are being addressed. Everybody's case is different.
Thank you for sharing. One other theme that has been very prominent in just overall wellness is mental, spiritual health, social connection, those types of things. Can you talk a little bit about how you see the relationship between those concepts and longevity?
One way that I assess mental health is just by asking my patients about their social life, who they interact with. Do they frequently have friends that they make an appointment with for coffee, to go out on a lunch date, traveling? That says a lot to me about that patient's mental stability. Ultimately, yes, we all work very hard. I would argue that Americans are some of the hardest working people in the world. We work so much that it is difficult to make time to socialize and to work out and to eat healthy. I get it. But social interaction is so important for longevity. They've done studies on Italians in terms of like people who live way past 100. This one lady, she's 101. Her apartment is on the second floor, no elevator, no air conditioning. I don't know how she does it. She climbs up the stairs, comes down, takes her bag with her. As she goes down to the market, it's a steep slope. She greets and talks to every neighbor at each apartment that are on the second and third floor, just having a conversation with her about her day, how her granddaughter is doing. She comes back, she talks to the same people, climbs up the stairs, cooks food. All the furniture is low, everything is low. So, the joke that I have with my dad is, no, I'm not going to get you that easy chair because you're going to be more lazy. You're not going to get up and walk. Look at that show on Netflix. This is what I tell my patients and my, especially people that are not mobile or that are not moving, is not only is social interaction so key, like that lady that I just mentioned who walks down to the market, but also the fact that we should not let our devices in our home make us so inactive. Let me pick that word other than lazy, that we're not getting up and interacting with people, talking to our neighbors, that sort of thing. But social isolation is one of the risk factors for depression, anxiety, and suicidal ideation.
And I'm going to maybe amplify something I heard with the kind of lifestyle piece, which I think may be right, is that you can choose where you want to spend your time or where you want to live, and that may have the ability to influence some of these different recommendations that you have in terms of the activity requirements, the social opportunities, those types of things can start just by making the best choice you can on where to live.
Of course, I think that if you have the ability to pick where you live, that will make a huge difference, especially people that are approaching retirement. I think it is so important to pick a place where you don't feel socially isolated. You might be closer to your children, to your grandkids, to friends that you maybe grew up with in high school, but doing something, maybe even walking with a neighbor. People that walk and talk. There are studies on that as well. You're combining exercise with socializing, but you have to make time for these small changes in your life, which will lead to a huge impact with longevity for sure.
Well, thank you. This has been great.
And if somebody asked me, in summary, what would you tell people listening to our podcast who want to live longer? I would quickly say, number one, there's no magic pill for longevity. The closest thing we have is the combination of what we discussed: nutrition, exercise, strength training, sleep. managing your stress, meaningful relationships, by the way, making sure you're getting out of toxic relationships and getting into meaningful relationships, and preventive care. I'm a family doctor. You want to get your mammograms, your colonoscopies. We don't stress enough about how preventive care is saving so many lives and making sure that people are diagnosed early with cancer and not later. And then also, my favorite statement that I've made on TV is, treat your body like a temple and it will reward you for years to come.
Thank you for listening to Living Real Change. To hear more stories from across Piedmont Healthcare, be sure to subscribe and watch for upcoming episodes. For additional health tips, news, and resources, visit us at piedmont.org/living-real-change.